What is an annotated bibliography and why do one? Keep watching because I'm going to break all of that down in this video. If we've not met before, hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Yardley and I help PhD students get out of their own way and finish their doctorates. Now, the annotated bibliography is something that you might come across in the early stages of your PhD, whilst you're still getting to grips with the literature, and it can be super helpful for staying organised. Because searching for literature can get a little bit overwhelming. You might end up collecting hundreds of PDF journal articles and book chapters, and you just kind of tuck them away in your cloud storage. And they sit there, silently judging you for not doing anything with them. But doing an annotated bibliography can be a really useful way of minimising that. Anyway, gone off on a bit of a tangent there. So let's get back to basics. What is an annotated bibliography? An annotated bibliography is a list of references, but with an important twist. Each reference includes a short annotation. An annotation is a few sentences or a paragraph that describes, evaluates, and reflects on the source. And the idea with it is to show not just what the source is about, but why it's relevant and how it connects to your research. It's a really good way of keeping track of what you've read and ensuring that you pull the best bits of that into your PhD work. Why should you do an annotated bibliography? Why should you care about it? I know you've got a million other things on your plate, but trust me, mastering the annotated bibliography will pay off in the long run. First off, it helps you stay organised. No more getting lost in a sea of journal articles or feeling the guilt over all those PDFs in your cloud storage. Plus, it sharpens your critical thinking. You'll be actively engaging with each source and asking yourself, is this really going to help me with my research? So you end up with sources that are really relevant for your work, and you get rid of all those just-in-case sources that you're hoarding and feeling really bad for not reading. Now, we need to talk about different levels of annotation. There are 3 levels, which range from the quite basic and superficial to the more complex. First up, there's the descriptive annotation. This is the basic level, where you are just summarising the content of the source. What are the main arguments? What's the research about? It's pretty straightforward, but it's not very deep. The next level is an evaluative annotation. Here, you're stepping it up. You're still summarising, but you're also evaluating the credibility, the usefulness, and the relevance to your research. Is the research solid? Is it in your ballpark? And thirdly, the reflective annotation. This one's my favourite because it's all about your research. You'll summarise and evaluate, but you'll also reflect on how this source fits into your project. How does it influence your thinking? How might it shape what you're doing? Now you know about those different levels, we're going to dive into a bit more detail on each of them in a moment. But before we do, I just want to talk about literature searching. I'm not going to go into detail about how to search the literature in this video because that would make it really long, but I will just say this. You need to make sure that you are using the best keywords and the best key phrases when you're searching the literature. Because what you put into academic search engines or databases is going to determine the usefulness and the relevance of what you get out of them. There are probably some keywords and some key phrases that you've missed or you've overlooked, and they will be crucial in unlocking access to areas of the literature that you might not be aware of yet. So it is super important to spend some time on those keywords and those key phrases. I've got a much more in-depth video all about this. I will link to it on the screen right now and I'll pop it in the description for later. Okay, so back to those levels of annotation. Firstly, summarising. Once you've got that source in your hand or on your screen, the first task is to summarise it. What's it all about? What are the main arguments? What evidence does the author use? Keep it brief. Here's a quick checklist to get you started. Firstly, the reference. So the author, the title, etc. Who wrote this and what's it called? Secondly, the main argument. What is the main point that the author is making? Next up, evidence used. What kind of research or data backs up the author's claim? And lastly, conclusion. What does the author conclude? Here on the screen is an example, and you might want to pause the video or take a screenshot here. So you can see how this annotation starts with a full citation of the article, followed by a concise summary of the study's focus, methods, and conclusions. Next up, you'll need to evaluate the source. This is where you get to flex your critical thinking muscles. You're making a judgment about the source's value, so ask yourself these questions. Is the research reliable? Is it from a reputable journal or researcher? Is the source relevant? So does it directly relate to your research topic? What are its strengths and weaknesses? Is the argument well supported, or are there gaps? And here on the screen is an example of an evaluation. And you can see how this goes beyond just summarising the article. It points out why the research is timely and relevant, but also highlights its limitations, like the focus on US data. It even suggests areas for improvement, such as needing more recent data. So this is a great way to show that you're engaging critically with the source. You're not just describing it. Before we move on to the next section, I want to hear from you in the comments. What has been your biggest challenge when searching for literature for your PhD so far? Is it narrowing down your search, finding relevant sources, keeping track of everything, or something else? Let me know. I would love to hear about it. And I'd also love to help you out if you're stuck on anything, so pop that in the comments too. Lastly, you reflect on the source's relevance. This is where you link the source back to your own research. How does this article, this book, this paper help you? Think about how it fits with your research aims. Think about whether it answers any of your research questions or sheds any light on them. You might ask yourself these questions. In what ways is this helpful for my research? What specific aims or research questions does it connect to? Does it offer new ideas or gaps that I could explore further? And here on the screen, we've got an example of a reflection. You can see how this connects the source directly to the researcher's own project. It highlights why the findings are relevant to their specific topic on digital inequality in higher education, and it acknowledges the parallels between the US and the UK context. This kind of reflection is key because it shows you how the source fits into your own research and how you might use it in your own dissertation. Next up, I just want to make a quick point about formatting. Formatting is key, okay? So make sure that you are using the correct referencing style. Make sure you know what referencing style you need to use at your institution or within your discipline. Familiarise yourself with it and make sure that you are using it consistently across your annotated bibliography. You don't want to have one section where you're using APA and another section where you're using Harvard and another one where it's just a mishmash of both. Be consistent, because this is really good practice for referencing in your actual PhD thesis. Popping up on your screen right now is another video I think you'll find helpful if you're starting out with your literature review. In it, I share some tips on how to stay focused and how not to get lost in a sea of literature, some of which may not be relevant. So go and check that out. I'll see you in there.